Well, welcome back to Whole Bible Study with Taddy and Oi. If you're just joining us, we've been walking through the early chapters of Exodus, following the incredible journey of Moses and the Israelites. God has just led his people out of Egypt after the dramatic night of the first Passover. Pharaoh has finally let them go, and the people are now heading out into the wilderness under God's guidance. This chapter picks up as they begin their journey, unaware that Pharaoh's heart will change once more. Let's read Exodus chapter 14 together. Exodus chapter 14 from the NIV version. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near Pi Hahiroth, between Megiddo and the sea. They are to encamp by the sea directly opposite Baal Zephon. Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. And I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army. And the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord," so that the Israelites did this. Then the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled Pharaoh and his officials, changed their minds about them, and said, "What have we done? We have let the Israelites go and have lost their services." So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots, along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of the Pharaoh king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites, who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi Hahiroth, opposite Baal Zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you need only to be still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front to stood behind them. Coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to the one side and light to the other side, so that neither went near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with all the water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and the Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He jammed the wheels of their chariots so that they had difficulty driving, and the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and the horsemen. The entire army of the Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea, not one of them survived. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw that the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. Now for the deep dive for Exodus chapter 14. Exodus chapter 14 stands as one of the most iconic and defining moments in the entire biblical narrative. This chapter doesn't just recount a miraculous escape, it reveals a pivotal theological turning point. The shift from bondage to freedom, from despair to faith, from fear to worship. But to fully grasp its power, we have to dive into its rich layers, historical, cultural, linguistic, and spiritual. Let's begin with geography. The Israelites are told to camp at Pharaoh between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal Zephon, in verse 2. These are real, traceable places along the northeastern edge of Egypt, near the Gulf of Suez. The name Pi Ha-Hiroth likely means mouth of the gorges, hinting at a narrow escape route with cliffs or desert terrain, perfect for creating a natural trap. Baal Zephon was a Canaanite storm god whose temple stood nearby, worshipped as a deity of the sea and of navigation. This location matters. Israel camps in full view of an idol symbolizing foreign power. It's not just Egypt watching them. It's the gods of Egypt being challenged by the God of Israel. And then there's the trap. God intentionally leads Israel into a vulnerable position. Verse 3. This seems counterintuitive. Why would God place his people in harm's way? But here strategy becomes theology. God isn't interested in a clean getaway. He wants Egypt and Israel to see who he truly is. And in ancient warfare, the might of a nation was represented by its gods. By drawing Pharaoh in and destroying him in dramatic fashion, God is not only liberating Israel, he's publicly defeating the spiritual hierarchy of Egypt. The Hebrew text uses the word kabod in verse 4, often translated as glory, but more literally meaning weight or heaviness. God will gain glory over Pharaoh. He will outweigh him in the scales of power, honor, and divine reputation. When Pharaoh's army approaches, the people panic. Verse 10 captures their terror vividly. This isn't just fear of death, it's existential despair. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? In verse 11, Egypt was famous for its burial culture, the pyramids, the elaborate tombs, the obsession with the afterlife. Their sarcastic question is biting. You took us from the land of the dead just to bury us in the sand. But it's Moses' response in verses 13 through 14 that echoes throughout history. Do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. These words are not only personal, they are revolutionary. In the ancient Near East, gods didn't fight for you unless you earned their favor through rituals, sacrifices, or blood. But Israel's God steps into the battle purely out of covenantal love. The Hebrew word for fight here is lacham, often used in military contexts. Yahweh is going to war, not with spears, but with the elements of creation. And that's exactly what happens. The sea parts. This is the climax. Verse 21 says, the Lord used a strong east wind to drive the sea back all night. In Hebrew, this is roch, a word that means wind, spirit, and breath. the same word used in Genesis 1:2 when God's Spirit hovered over the waters. This isn't just meteorology, it's theology. Creation itself is obeying the Creator. The path through the sea is described as dry ground, with the wall of water on each side in verse 22. The Hebrew charabat, or for dry, also appears in Genesis to describe the land emerging from the flood. This is the new creation moment. God is not just saving his people, he's remaking them. The Red Sea is a womb, and Israel is being born into a nation. But here's something subtle here, yet profound. The Egyptians go in after them. Why would they? Wouldn't they already have seen enough? The text says God hardened their hearts again in verse 17. Continuing a theme from earlier chapters, the Hebrew kazak means to make strong or rigid. This isn't arbitrary punishment. It's a reflection of a heart already bent on control. Pharaoh cannot relinquish power. He must dominate it even unto death. God's presence is again visible in the pillar of cloud and fire in verses 19, which moves behind Israel to protect them. This imagery echoes the ancient motif of divine kingship. In Mesopotamian culture, gods were often depicted as traveling with their people in mobile shrines or clouds. Here, Yahweh becomes both warrior and sanctuary, shielding his people from harm while orchestrating cosmic judgment. Verses 24 through 25 are cinematic. The Lord looks down from the pillar and throws Egypt into confusion. The word for confusion here, hamam, suggests panic, chaos, divine disruption. The very chariots that symbolized Egyptian supremacy now jam the stall. Chariots were Egypt's greatest military innovation, lightweight, fast, deadly. And yet in the sea they are useless. Power becomes weakness. Pharaoh's might sinks. Moses stretches out his hand once more in verse 27, and the waters return. The entire army is swept away. The Hebrew doesn't soften this. Not one of them survives, says in verse 8. This is not God being cruel, it's God being just. Pharaoh had drowned the sons of Israel in the Nile. Now the waters answer. It's poetic justice, not revenge. In Jewish liturgy, this moment is remembered not with dancing alone, but with sober awe. According to the Talmud, in Megillon 10b, when the angels begin to rejoice at Egypt's downfall, God said, "My creatures are drowning in the sea, and you sing songs." What we see here is not a simplistic tale of good guys versus bad guys. It's the sobering recognition of how the human lust for power can lead to destruction, and how divine mercy, even when costly, makes a path forward. The final verse of the chapter, verse 31, says, "The people feared the Lord and put their trust in him." The Hebrew for feared is yareh, not terror, but reverent awe. For the first time, Israel is not just delivered, they are spiritually awakened. They believe, not just in God's existence, but in his goodness, his power, and his promises. This moment becomes the defining event in Israel's memory. Throughout the Bible, the Exodus, specifically the Red Sea crossing, is referenced as the proof of God's faithfulness. It's the cornerstone of Jewish identity, the ultimate metaphor for salvation, and the dramatic demonstration of what it means to be redeemed. Culturally, this story is more than just myth or miracle. It is a liberation narrative rooted in trauma, hope, and transformation. Slavery, exile, suffering, these are not erased, but reframed. The oppressed become a people, wanderers become witnesses, the frightened become faithful. In many African American spirituals, the Exodus becomes the central theme. Songs like "Go Down, Moses" or "Wade in the Water" carried not just theological resonance, but encoded hope. This chapter's imagery inspired freedom movements, abolitionists, and prophets of justice across generations. Why? Because the Exodus doesn't just belong to Israel. It speaks to every soul yearning for deliverance. This story is also rich with psychological and emotional insight. Israel is free, but terrified. God delivers, but doesn't coddle. He leads them into situations that demand trust, not because he is testing for obedience, but because trust is the soil where faith grows. The splitting sea represents the dividing line between the old and the new, between the who we were and who we are becoming, between between Egypt's chains and God's promises. Now for some closing reflections. This chapter leaves me in awe, not just at the miracle of the sea, but at the compassion and complexity of our God. He doesn't just rescue us, he walks with us, protects us, fights for us, and invites us to believe even when everything looks impossible. There are times in life when we feel trapped, like the Israelites, walls on every side, danger behind, no path forward. And in those moments, maybe God is preparing to split the sea we don't even know exists. If this chapter opened your heart or made you think differently about who God is, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and share what stood out to you. Maybe it's something I didn't mention or a personal story you have for yourself. Thank you for being a part of this study with me. May you walk forward today with the courage to trust that God is still parting the seas and still leading his people out of bondage. Thank you again, and we will see you in the next chapter tomorrow.